Trench warfare during World War I would claim more than 800,000 lives. British naval officer Winston Churchill promoted the deployment of armored land vehicles. It was hoped that this new tank weapon would protect advancing British soldiers from the bullets of German machine guns. The tank's early successes changed the way wars would be fought, as soon as tank technology caught up with its potential. By World War II, tanks were the backbone of the European armies. In the northern Sahara Desert, German Afrika Korps Commander Erwin Rommel was ultimately defeated by British Lieutenant General Bernard Law Montgomery in their legendary tank battles. On the Eastern Front, the German Army's panzers were being outgunned by the Soviets' T-34s. Although experts in combining air and ground forces, the German military was ultimately crushed in the East by the massive deployment of Soviet tanks and artillery. This Soviet battle doctrine emphasizing huge numbers of armored vehicles is still followed today. The Soviet Army's victory at Kursk started their march into Berlin. On the Western Front, U.S.-built M4 Sherman tanks were commanded by Generals Omar Bradley, George S. Patton, and Courtney H. Hodges. In the Allies' final drive of the war, a key bridge which crossed the Rhine River at Remagen was captured intact. The fierce house-to-house battle inside the German city was over within hours. The victory at Remagen allowed Allied tank forces to push into the heart of Germany, and within a month, the war in Europe was over. Across the Pacific, U.S. Marines fought with tanks in their land battles against the Japanese Army. After a Japanese stronghold had been bombarded by aircraft and from offshore naval guns, the landed Marines and their tanks were assigned the bloody job of conquering the island. A complex system of tunnels and pillboxes meant that the final fights would be extremely close and dangerous. Tanks were modified with flamethrowers to root out the most tenacious Japanese defenders. The Japanese soldier was just about the most dedicated fighting man ever put into battle. Out of 120,000 troops stationed on Okinawa, only 7,400 allowed themselves to be taken prisoner. Many Japanese who refused to give up suffered horrible deaths as they were incinerated by flamethrowers. As in Europe, tanks made absolutely clear to all which army controlled the area. They were the final decisive force in each of the war's land battles. The Soviets, who occupied North Korea after World War II, installed a communist government hostile to the United Nations Democratic Republic in the South. Less than 1 year after independence, the South underwent a surprise attack as 8 full North Korean infantry divisions invaded across the border. With less than half of the North's military strength, South Korea's army, fighting beside a handful of U.S. troops, were nearly overwhelmed before help could arrive. The Soviet-built T-34 tanks left over from World War II were still awesome weapons in the early 1950s. North Korea's Soviet-styled massive deployment of armor and infantry left the democratic forces no choice but to retreat. The communist momentum was to carry them down to the tip of the Korean peninsula near Busan. Commanding General Douglas MacArthur and his officers planned an ingenious landing at Incheon, near the capital city of Seoul. Troops, heavily armed M41 Walker Bulldog and M4 Sherman tanks were convoyed to attack the communist forces from behind and cut off their supplies from the north. The panicking communists fought UN forces fiercely. Communist tank platoons were stopped dead in their tracks. The Korean War would now become one of attrition, not too different from the trench warfare of World War I. After checking a Chinese counterattack, General James Van Fleet retook the offensive and destroyed the communist forces below the 38th parallel.